47 minutes that I have in hand with me. This journey is actually the mode of transport is totally different. We have with us Rajat Ubhaikar. Now, Rajat Ubhaikar is actually an electrical engineer from IIT Kanpur. After that, he decided to become a journalist and studied journalism from Asian School of Journalism. He also has been awarded the Polestar Award for his reportage in Mint and other publications. What Rajat has done with this book, actually I was reading the book for the past few days, and that's what I told him when I spoke to him, that it was as if I was spending my evenings with him. His prose actually is very evocative. It makes you, it just paints the entire scenery in front of you. More about the book, I'm going to invite Rajat to tell us and take us through this journey. Rajat, please. The flow of the session is Rajat is going to talk about why and how he wrote his book, his experiences when doing that, and then we take the conversation forward.
Thank you for that very generous introduction, Neda. And to start off with, I am Rajat Ubhaikar. I have authored this travelogue called Truck Day India, a Hitchhiker's Guide to Hindustan. And I'll be talking about what motivated me to write this book, to go on this journey. And I'll also be talking about what route I took, what parts of the country I covered. And then we'll get into the conversation. So, to start off with my motivations, I did this journey when I was around 23, 24. So, my motivation then was to simply try and escape the sort of environment of a desk job. I had some adventurous inclinations, and so it primarily took birth in this sense of adventure I had and curiosity about this huge country called India we live in. That was my personal motivation. But as far as the motivation of the book itself is concerned, it somehow struck me that over 70 years after independence, not a single book or any study had been done on what the truck drivers of India, what their lives are like. Given how crucial their role is in the conduct of our economy, they pretty much carry every good that we consume. So I thought there would be some value in probably exploring their lives, their life on the highways, and that made me want to go out. So I started my journey in 2015. That was the first leg of my journey. And the story behind that also is, one fine day I walked into my editor's office. I told her that, no ma'am, I'm sorry, I'm going to quit this job. I want to go on this 3-month tour of India with truck drivers. She said, okay, well, why would you want to do that? Why don't you just write 6 articles for us, and you will also get your salary while you're on the journey. So that was a very good break for me, because it allowed me to do something as crazy as this while having the comfort of a job and a salary. So that ended up happening. And the second leg of my journey was in 2018 when I went to South India. So in the first leg I travelled from Mumbai to Srinagar, all the way to Srinagar in the north, passing through the states of Gujarat, Rajasthan, Punjab, Haryana, and lots of small towns in between where I used to stay now and then. And I also travelled in the northeast, Nagaland, Assam, Manipur, which are sort of insurgency affected areas. So the dynamic there is very different from the rest of India. And then the last leg was in the south, where I covered Karnataka, Telangana, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Kerala. So that was a rough route I took and sort of legs I took. And apart from that, the motivations I've told you. So I think we should get on with the conversation and we can explore more.
Right. Rajat, yes, of course, it's a travelogue. But you have been to those corners of the country that we have probably seen only in art movies, not too in mainstream cinema. So can you tell us about the hinterland, the Indian hinterland, and how this road travel, and please tell us about some characters that you met there, because you've described them very effusively.
So the Indian hinterland, especially in the north, is overwhelmingly male for starters. Like you don't see too many women on the roads at all, and that gets a bit bizarre as you keep going. But at the same time, when you pass through the villages of Haryana, for instance, you see that almost all the manual work is being done by women, right from harvesting to riding bullock carts to carrying water. Not a single man in action, as far as my
You've written it's the best place to be born as a male, Haryana. That's
Yeah.
what he says in this book.
Yeah, so the Indian hinterland is firstly it's extraordinarily diverse in the sense that I could not describe it as that would be to generalize it, because every 50 kilometers, 100 kilometers, the language changes, the food changes. So I mean, I try to write about that a bit in my book because that is something that needs to be written down and before we lose it in this sort of homogeneity that is taking over. So yeah, I think that should.
So, as we go journey with him in the book, he takes us, of course, he takes us to Punjab and Haryana and Mewar, and then with the Kashmiri drivers, and then the Northeast. Everywhere he has captured the specific traits of specific people, not just their language or not just their dress. But he's done it so well, and again, terrific eye for detail. So, can you please elaborate on those traits, the specific traits of those people?
So, as far as truck drivers are concerned, there are varying traits that people in different states have, which is also often visible in the sort of truck art we see in that particular region. So in Punjab and parts of Rajasthan, many of the truck drivers are sort of addicted to opium, which is not as much in other parts, but it has a lot of history behind why opium is used, especially in Punjab and Rajasthan. So they do it as the sort of, to get rid of biological distractions so they can stay focused on the road. And ultimately it devolves into very serious addiction. So one driver whom I traveled with and became good friends with, in fact, I went to his home later. So he battled this addiction, he has been battling it for a long time and continues to do so. So in Punjab you find many of these truckers, because over 75% from informal estimates are hooked to some or the other form of opium. And in Kashmir, for instance, there are entire villages that have trucking as their primary occupation. So the entire village full of truckers. They say that if you come to our village, you will not find any bikes or cars. You will only find trucks parked over there.
I'll just come back to the drug addiction part. Can you tell the audience about the bookie and the chitta?
Yeah. So of course, drugs being there being of a large variety. So the drug that is consumed by the truck drivers is called bukki, which is poppy husk basically, which is the last dregs of the poppy that is finally consumed by. So it's like the lowest grade of opium in a way. And but at the same time there are several other drugs that are prevalent. So chitta is one of them. Chitta in Punjabi means white. So that is the term for heroin that they use, but also to various other drugs that have acquired the name of chitta, lots of synthetic drugs. So one of the brothers of the guy I traveled with, he had succumbed to the chitta addiction, which is way more dangerous than opium itself.
And it's readily available in the
That's what they say, but yeah, in recent news I'm seeing that there has been some efforts, so hopefully.
over the counter
Yeah.
for people who want it.
Yeah.
Right. And then he talks about his travels through Rajasthan and Mewar and how the caste lines exist there. And they're really, they're extremely relevant to the people there, and they're also very obvious and in your face there. So can you please throw some light on that?
So in Rajasthan, while I was traveling, I went with this crew of Gujjars from Rajasthan. So I found out about the specific traits of what they call being Gujjar. So one of the primary traits of that is worshipping this god called Dev Narayan. So I discovered that almost every caste in India has these sort of Jati Puranas by which they define their own identity. in relation to other castes and build up these origin myths for their own castes in terms of how they originated and what differentiates them from others. At the same time, they use these to contest the high place assigned to them in the sort of Brahminical hierarchy. So that was very intriguing because the stories reveal so much about how these castes perceive themselves. So they usually paint themselves as of being of originally martial origin, and ultimately through some betrayal, their status got degraded. So that opened up an entire new world. And as literacy has increased, so earlier these Jati Puranas were mostly orally transmitted, but as literacy has increased, the transmission and propagation is now happening through the written medium, which has often ended up enforcing caste identities in the sense that because they now have a readily available source that points to their heritage and their lineage.
So you've talked about the Sisodiyas and the Maratha encounters with the Sisodiyas. You've also talked about another deity, that is the Savaliya Seth, they call it. And so this is interesting. Now they believe that God has already transcended the earth, and it's not Kalki that they are looking at, it is the Savaliya Seth, right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
So
you have to tell the story
it's
now.
like in Rajasthan, for example, there are some temples where truck drivers will thong because he is supposed to be their patron deity, protecting the guys who travel in trucks. So in outside of Savaliya Seth was one such temple that we visited in between. So when we stopped, there's like an entire crew of trucks who were parked just so that they can go and pay their respects. So you can see how religion, there's a huge influence of religion, especially in a line that is as uncertain and dangerous as trucking, where you need God's grace
Exactly, you need
all the
God's
time.
grace every time. So any near-death experiences?
Yeah, twice near-death experiences. Once when we were traveling from Jammu to Srinagar, one of the crew members in front of us his truck collapsed into the ravine which was there. So that was pretty scary because he fell asleep at the wheel. Actually, that is the biggest cause of accidents mostly, because it is not drunken driving or anything like that as is the case in popular perception. It is often just sleep deprivation and exhaustion, because I have seen their lifestyle firsthand, and they barely catch 2-3 hours of sleep before they have to set off again. So with that level of sleep deprivation, accidents are bound to happen. So once that was in Jammu and again in in Punjab, because our truck was severely overloaded, the guy could not stop his truck in time, and we almost ended up colliding into India. So yeah, it was pretty scary, but yeah, that's how their life is always.
And that's where the Dev Narayan and Savaliya Seth comes into play
Yeah,
to guard
yeah.
the lives. Right. So again, now he talks about this interesting thing called truck art, and he has really painted the word picture very well. So can you please tell us, and there are some students, I think the art students are going to draw something for you. So Truck Day India, actually we've all grown up in trucks and reading what is written behind them. Buri nazar wale tera muh kala is the most common one that comes to mind. Rajat, throw light on this. Tell us about the whole
So
process.
when we talk about trucks, usually in the mind's eye you always see this colorful, painted truck. But how does this truck art come into, like how is it made in the first place? What is the history behind it, and why is truck art so surprisingly common in the subcontinent but not in other parts of the world? All these were questions that actually sort of motivated me to go out there and find out, because it was sort of enigmatic, right? You don't know, you see it everywhere but you don't know why it's there. So truck art basically is an elaborate process. So making a truck, I'll first explain how a truck is made in the first place. So it is a very complex sort of task with at least 15 to 20 specialized workers who work in coordination in a huge workshop to finally make a truck. So they only get the chassis, which is from the manufacturer, and then it goes through various stages. So you have the welder, you have the bodybuilder, you have the artisan, you have the art people. So there are 15 to 20 types. So that's how it's made. And I visited a couple of such workshops, one in Punjab, one in Tamil Nadu. So truck art, the history behind it is very interesting because in my view at least, it is a remnant of the kind of art that was practiced by the ancient trading communities of India, like the Banjaras. So when you read about their life in say very various sources, especially colonial sources and even before that, the kind of designs they did on their bullocks or on their camels, strikingly similar designs you find on trucks today. So as trucks replaced pack animals as the primary mode of transport, the truck art also got transposed from the animals to the vehicles. So I think that is the rough history behind it. And as far as the practice goes, it is extraordinarily dazzling in Kashmir and Punjab in India, and especially in Pakistan. Pakistan truck art has achieved global acclaim because of the intricate details. But even in India, you will find great truck art in Kashmir and Punjab. In the south, relatively, the attitude towards trucking is unsentimental. So the truck art is very minimal and very functional.
So how are these artists, what is the brief that an artist gets? मेरा truck paint कर दो. What will they do and what will they say?
Yeah. So there are a few motifs which sort of recur in truck art and form a loose aesthetic convention. So you can have a Taj Mahal. So the guy, a truck driver will tell, okay, I want this particular, I want a cow and a calf, or I want a swan, and I want this written below my truck because that is my motto. Like over the driver की the owner की गाड़ी driver का पसीना चलकर चलती है सड़कों पर बनकर हसीना. So like that is a very sort of common one. They love that one. So because often a truck is not just a truck, it's a she. चलती है गाड़ी पर बनकर रास्तों में बनकर हसीना. Like who something which offers you the security of your faraway home and also the embrace of a wife maybe. So yeah, so that in that sense it's always a she, and like a bejeweled bride you need to deck her up because otherwise it would be a disgrace. So that all that sort of things are in play behind the truck art. I guess that's the sort of procedure that.
So the driver has a say in the truck art, major.
He has a huge say because he's there for a month supervising each and every aspect. In Punjab, especially, these guys will stay for a month at the expense of the truck bodybuilder.
Okay.
So they will stay there and they'll ensure that everything is according to their specification.
Wow, wow. Customization, top of it. Alright. Also, there is this very interesting thing which you've dealt with in every chapter, that is music. So every place that you went to, there was some different type of music, but again, regions had their specific music. Can you talk about that now?
So the very first driver I traveled with, when I was most nervous, because I had no clue of how the journey is going to be, what the people are going to be. The very first driver I ended up traveling with, his primary motivation for becoming a truck driver was music. Because, yeah, so while on the way, I found that this guy had amazing taste. Like right from Mohammed Rafi to Lata Mangeshkar to amazing Punjabi ghazals, superb stuff. Like throughout our entertainment, I was wondering like, what an amazing collection this guy has. Then we were just chatting at the dhaba, and he said, "Why?" I asked him, "Why did you become a truck driver?" He said, "As a kid, I had many cousins who used to take me around in their trucks on joyrides, listening to music. So that's when I decided this is what I want to do. I didn't like studying so much, so I decided I'll have my truck, I'll drive around the country, listening to my favorite music." And then he even sang a song for us.
Super.
So yeah, music does play a huge life because it breaks the monotony of long journey. And it does vary. I mean, in the Northeast, like the young Northeastern guys, like 18, 19 or even less, they are the ones who drive trucks. So they listen to Justin Bieber and Rihanna and all this stuff. And if you go to Punjab, it is proper Punjabi trucker songs is a separate genre in itself.
Yeah.
Many of which I found out when I was traveling with them. And as far as the Gujjars are concerned, theirs was the most, I had never imagined because their songs had like sounds of farts and burps I had never imagined that stuff could be put into a song. So it was a different experience for me for certain.
And that was music to their ears.
Yeah, it was very interesting stuff.
And South India, you forgot that.
South India, yeah, in Kannada electronic, Kannada EDM music. Yeah.
Interesting, very interesting. Now, as we traverse, of course, the truck drivers had their art, their music, so it's quite a holistic experience to be with them. How was it staying at the dhabas? How was that?
That was the best part of the journey, mostly because I was still wondering, oh God, when are these guys going to stop for some food? I'm so hungry because they eat very less. Like they eat once, they'll have breakfast, which is usually brunch, then they'll have dinner. Between they'll stop for some chai. I used to really look forward to those dhaba stops, and the food was amazing, like across the country. The main thing to remember is we think of these dhabas as unhygienic and stuff, but for the drivers, they know the places where you get the food hot and clean, and so they have their favorite places which have great food that is not even hygienically dubious. It's made right there in front of you, hot and piping. So I didn't have a single stomach issue at all throughout my trip. So yeah, I guess it says stuff about my stomach or about quality of dhaba food.
Again, you have music, you've got art, and you've got gastronomy, all put together in a lovely journey through, I think, one of the most culturally varied country of this earth. Now, there are certain things that you've mentioned, and these come in every chapter. That in mostly every chapter, you've talked about some really unsavory happenings that you've seen or witnessed. So there is child sexual abuse that you've spoken about. There is prostitution. Could you elaborate on these things?
Yeah, so child sexual abuse in India is highly correlated with child labor. So wherever you have child laborers, the probability of them regarded as innocent children goes down. So even on highways, it's extremely common, of course, as we all know, to have these chotus, serving tea, bringing you parathas. But these guys are the ones who are often subject to a lot of sexual abuse. So the concept, I talk about this in my book too. The concept of childhood itself is an invented one. It is a learned one. You need school, you need books, you need the idea of shame to even think about a child as a child who needs to be protected from sexual secrets especially. But in India, because of poverty, lack of opportunities, illiteracy, you find that millions of child, like the latest report puts it at 10.1 million. We have 10.1 million child laborers in India, out of whom the large proportion are sexually abused, one of which I witnessed in front of me in a dhaba, which I write about. So, I mean, that is just something I saw. What happens behind closed doors is pretty unimaginable. So it's a pretty sad situation that needs to be talked about more, and child labor needs to be tackled on a very hard footing because it's super prevalent everywhere, especially on the highways. So that is one aspect which I do write about in the book. And second, of course, being prostitution. So prostitution on the highways is an age-old practice. It has been happening ever since man was the oldest profession. It still goes on. And things have evolved now because the prostitutes, they conduct their business through in the bushes. So they have a pimp who will light a flashlight, and they will alert passengers, the truckers in the dark, that there is some opportunity here. Often robbers also use that trick. So robbers will try to tempt truckers and then take away all their cash. So truckers always have to be very wary while succumbing to their temptations. So yeah, I think these two issues were something that slightly an unsavory aspect of the journey, but very much necessary for truckers who live long times away from the family.
Okay. Now another fact that you've written in your book is about the educational levels and how they talk about education with each other and how they're very convinced कि पढ़ा लिखा होने से कोई काम नहीं होता है. So can you throw a little more light on that through your characters that you see?
Attitudes towards education, I think they were sort of cynical about education for themselves. like what's the point of me doing anything? But for their children, they were extremely optimistic. Many of them, their only purpose of being there was so that their kids could go to an English medium school. So education as an aspirational tool to achieve social mobility is undoubtedly there in the minds of most people in India. They are very much aware. The only way to get out of your current social station is education. So they are very much aware, and they know that being illiterate also has its costs. For example, if you want to get a driver's license without appearing for the test, which is what like large numbers of truckers do actually, they get it through a dalal or someone. So if you are illiterate, they will charge you more because you don't know the nitty-gritties. So they know that being illiterate means that the world will make a fool of you, and the only way to improve your life is education.
So you went from Rajasthan to Punjab, Haryana, Delhi, and then you went to the Northeast. Tell us how Northeast is and everything else that you've written there.
Then I went to the Northeast, which is Dimapur in Nagaland. I arrived there, it was a rainy season, and when I went out trying to find a truck, they told me that, okay, see, all the trucks here, those who carry food and fuel, they are escorted by the paramilitary. So there's no way you can like break into that unless you have some secret spy or something. So I found out that hitching trucks in the Northeast is an entirely different game.
Well, just to keep it in context, what was the time period or what years?
This was in July 2015.
2015. Okay.
So when I went there, this was the first challenge I found out that trucks don't just travel like that. They are escorted by the military because of the insurgency. Many insurgent groups are there on the northeastern highways, which means that trucking can be a very risky business. So essential supplies like food and fuel, which can destabilize the region, the non-availability of which. So these things are escorted by the military. And then I found out when I finally decided, okay, I'll go to some petrol pump and see if I can find one. Then I found out the insurgents had foiled a bun, which is routine. So this highway NH39, which links Dimapur to Imphal to Manipur border, that is More. So this highway is the lifeline of Manipur and Nagaland. But out of 365 days, 1 out of 6 days, there's a bun on the highway, which means food, fuel cannot reach. There's the inflation levels in Imphal also you see are like stupendously high. When I went to Imphal, finally when I reached there, I found that there are no petrol pumps as such. There are women who sell petrol in these plastic bottles. That's the sort of black economy that exists because the supply of fuel is so unpredictable. So yeah, these were some of the challenges. And when I did end up traveling, I finally managed to find someone. So these was a very curious group because one of them was a Hindu Bodo from Assam, one of them was a Bengali Muslim, also from Assam. The third was a Christian. So I had like a Hindu, Muslim, Christian, 3 of them in a truck. Yeah. So they were like the sort of embodiments of Indian secularism in action. So that was very interesting traveling with them because you see the kind of insane diversity the Northeast has. Like the Assam by itself could be a country, given the extreme multi-ethnic nature of the demographics. So it was a very revealing experience.
So can you again tell us which places you went to in the Northeast?
So Northeast, I started from Dimapur. Dimapur is the commercial capital of Nagaland. From there I travelled to Kohima, which is the political capital of Nagaland. And from there to Imphal, which is the capital of Manipur. And yeah, from there I returned. That was the last final breaking point.
Take it till there. Right. Okay. And now just going ahead, since your resume also says that you've had a stint in management. Tell us about the economy that the truck drives. So
the economics of freight transport might seem sort of an esoteric or like boring subject, but it governs our lives to such an extent that we don't realize it.
Correct.
So you essentially have the transporter who owns the truck and who often employs truck drivers. Then you have the consignor who wants his goods transported. And then you have the booking agent who is the agent representing the consignor.
Right.
And then you have the consigning agent, commission agent, who is the agent of the operator. So finally you have like two sets of middlemen. So long story short, it is an industry which is highly fragmented. All like 75% of the trucks are owned by operators who own less than 5 trucks, which means there are small operators who essentially run the industry. And the second aspect of it is a large amount of the proceeds is cornered by the middlemen,
Right.
the commission agents and the booking agents. And there's a lot of cartelization, which means that the prices are fixed to the detriment of the truck drivers. So in general, truck drivers get the short end of the stick in the industry. And the crucial aspect which governs the running of this industry is overloading.
Right.
Without this, the industry cannot function. Overloading is essentially loading a truck beyond its prescribed weight capacity. So it is a killer on Indian roads. 92,500 people are killed every year on Indian roads thanks to overloading, which is a huge amount. Like every minute someone is dying out of it. But it is not at all talked about because it is not exactly a sexy topic which can be talked about. But it is a killer. There's something that needs to be done because not only does kill people, it also affects the quality of the roads, which are built to accommodate a certain axle weight. So the roads are damaged because you run overloaded trucks on it. But it continues to exist. Supreme Court has in fact banned it already. It's not like there's nothing has been done. Supreme Court has banned it way back in 2005. But it continues to exist because the RTOs continue to pocket money from allowing overloaded trucks to go. Consigners continue to save money by overloading one truck. And the operators themselves get a higher amount at the end of the day because they load more stuff. So because it's a win-win-win situation for all the major players, it continues to exist and it is essentially death on wheels, as I've titled it in my book.
Yeah, because you mentioned that if you ever lesson learned was that if you ever hear a truck driver honking, it's best to get out of the way because it means...
Absolutely. Do not ever willfully ignore a honking truck driver. Let that be the one lesson you take because often he is not in a position to stop the vehicle because the momentum is simply unmanageable.
Yes, and because of overloading. So who decides these prices and who decides the overloading and where does it come in?
The prices are basically decided by the booking agents who are the market makers. So that's the main problem. Since the intermediaries have a deciding view in terms of what price should be set. So the operators are often, they are beggars cannot be choosers, right? They are like the beggars of this industry.
Alright. Okay, now I really need to know who was your favorite character out of all those guys?
So my favorite character I think was Jora. In Punjab. He was a very interesting character and the simple generosity and the kind of stuff I discussed with him made him very close to me. Like I ended up staying at his home. They continue to call me when they are drunk sometimes. So yeah, all that. So in general, I remember him the most fondly.
He has actually also described how they have their meals and also the way they drink their booze. So again, when I asked him about the specifics, this was one fact that each community or each region has a way of drinking booze as well. So
I mean, I drank with quite a few of them, not on the road, off the road. But one of the groups, the Gujjars that I hung out with, they did not believe in saying cheers, no such niceties. All they would do is like go Jai Mata Di and just down it in one gulp, like no sipping allowed. You have to down it. So yeah, I got quite drunk.
So that's a nice one. Jai Mata Di goes in. Right. So through his travels, he's actually were you ever charged or did they ever take money or were you?
Not in North India. In South India, a couple of them did. Like I said, they have a relatively unsentimental approach. For them, a truck is an asset to be monetized, something that can be used to make more money. And there's good money picking up hitchhikers, especially in the south, near Bangalore. So one truck I traveled with had like 9 people along with me
Wow.
in that cabin. Because that guy believed in like maximizing the efficiency, packing efficiency of his truck. So we were just one guy, two couple of guys had their backs to the windshield. So there was only this much space that was left for him to see. The guys were sitting across the windshield. A farmer with a rice bag who walks in. And ultimately there were 9 people. So yeah, I was
anyone could join. So anyone could join it. Anyone could join the party.
After a while, the hitchhikers themselves said, "Oh no, man, I'm not going in that." But this guy continued. He did not want to stop.
So then the North Indians are more, let us say, benevolent, and the South Indians are more commercial oriented
I
when
would
it
say
comes
that.
to
I mean, that's like a
good
generalization.
business practices.
Yeah, it's a generalization, but yeah, I mean that attitude towards the truck itself,
Yes.
I can say
Yes.
that it's not like. I would say that in the south it's more of a livelihood. In the north it's more of a lifestyle
Right.
where they enjoy it. They
Right.
drive like the kings of the road. They often enjoy being truckers. The freedom that it allows you.
Awesome, awesome. Any particular people, not the drivers or not the khalasi, but any particular people that you met and you thought, oh, he's the same guy I met in Punjab and he's similar to the guy that I met there. Anything like that?
I mean, not exactly, but all I'll say is that, I was just struck by how much wasted potential is there in India. I met so many bright people whom I could obviously tell that this guy is super bright. He has a quick mind, he can understand things. If given the opportunities, he could have become something else. He's just here as a truck driver because of the circumstances he was born into. And I am here in the position of an observer because of the circumstances I am born into. So I was just struck by how much untapped potential lies in India. It is unbelievable. And I wish we could tap that somehow.
True that. So destiny's children we are. Rajat, with this I'm going to open the floor for audience questions.
Thank you.
And
Rajat, any bizarre food with Rajat Uphaikar experience?
In Dimapur, I did not have a chance to experience, but yeah, you have silkworms, frogs, dogs, all that is available for sale if you know how to prepare it. Unfortunately, there were no restaurants which were selling it, otherwise I would have tried it. But yeah, that's as bizarre as it got for me.
Congratulations, I've read the book and found it as fascinating as any work of fiction.
Wow,
It
thank
was
you.
so well paced and very extremely readable.
Thank you so much.
Now when you go through that book again, would you do it differently? Anything else you'd like to add? Certain experiences, I could see that there are episodes which you are kind of only just touching upon and then abandoning the thing.
So yeah, there was I wanted to write about Kerala too actually. A bit of my experiences in Kerala, UP. I travelled in UP too. UP was the only place where there's competition in trucks also. Like if you want to get a truck, there will be like 5-6 people standing behind you in 5 minutes. Okay, this guy knows how to find something. So then eventually when you get in, you see that there are already 4 or 5 people inside the truck. So not just buses or trains are overcrowded, trucks too are overcrowded.
And please tell the audience about that kharra thing which they have, which is like that.
The tobacco stuff which everybody carries, the Brazilian lifeline.
The carry, right?
Yeah.
That is, chewing tobacco is the most common vice and sort of universal among truck drivers, I can say, at least from my experience. So that is also, it's just to break the monotony. I've discovered you sort of cannot get on with this sort of lifestyle without some sort of vice. Because you need something to break the monotony, right? So it could be a cigarette, it could be a tobacco, something. One guy told me that I don't do anything, I only eat a lot of toffees. And his truck was like filled with toffee wrappers. So you need something to just keep having and break the monotony.
So how do you draw a line that this is where I stop talking about myself, what I experienced, what I felt, and this is where what I'm seeing is more important?
Writers sort of have an internalized approach where They like to talk a lot about their experience. This happened to me, I felt this. Whereas personally speaking, my view is of I like to bring the eye outwards rather than inwards. I like to be a spectator and neutral observer rather than protagonist of the journey. I'll prefer that the drivers be the protagonist, or in general, whoever I write about be the protagonist of the book rather than myself. I like my ideal would be like if you don't even notice I am there, then I'll have written a good travel book. So that's my personal approach.
Roads are not just parts of movement, parts of travel. Roads also have histories. Roads are stories. For example, a national highway, something like the Grand Trunk Road.
Yeah.
There's a history behind it. Did you do a lot of research?
I did a lot of research. I wanted to understand how the nature of travel and transport has changed across history. I'm a huge history buff actually, so I've had a lot of fun doing this research. So I found out that surprisingly not much has changed in India.
The GT road certainly has.
Yeah, not just the quality of the roads, the attitude of the officials, the experiences of the transporters, not much has changed. So for example, there's one traveler called Jean-Baptiste Tavernier who traveled in the Mughal era. So he writes that just in one city he found like 16 chowkis, which are like these checkposts you have to stop. Just like a truck driver today who has to negotiate countless nakabandis, checkposts, someone will have to stop him there. So travel and transport in India has never been a frictionless affair. The state itself creates a lot of friction, and that just amounts to highway robbery in my opinion, because there are so many illegal taxes, cesses, dadagiri. Like the truckers are subject to such an insane amount of dadagiri everywhere. In Maharashtra, near Solapur, there is this thing called dadagiri tax. They call it dadagiri tax. You have to pay 200 rupees. Every trucker passing by has to pay 200 rupees. So dadagiri tax, that's the name. So, and this sort of stuff also existed in the medieval era. So illegal collection, it has all persisted to this day.
By any chance, did you come across any female truck driver?
No, as far as I know, there's only one. But I did not come across anyone. Like I said, it's overwhelmingly male dominated.
Not even in the south of India?
No, I did not.
Post GST, you see any change?
Yeah, that's a good. I did actually. So the first leg of my journey was in 2015. Second leg was in 2018. So that gave me the chance to see how GST has actually impacted the truckers who had to bear the biggest burden, right, of stopping at state borders to pay sales tax, and it has made a huge impact. I was glad to see, because the wait time at the borders has reduced to almost reduced. I'm not sure. The Indian state is very good at coming up with new ways to harass people, so I don't know if anything has come up by now. But at that time, they had a very clean experience. No corruption also at the borders. Very smooth
That
experience.
is good to know. What I wanted to know is, have you seen any sort of long-term physical or psychosomatic impact on truck drivers other than drug addiction, relationship problems? Did they speak of any such experiences, or do they know of any people who left this particular profession but I'd say trauma continued?
So, the biggest disorder that I saw was eye problems. But due to this masculine aura that trucking has, if you wear this chashma, they will say, okay, what kind of truck driver are you? Are you wearing a chashma? So you will never see any truck driver wearing a chashma ever. And statistically, I'm sure at least half of them will have eye problems, right? So that is the biggest unresolved issue as far as physical disorders go. Relationship problems, yes. The Jora, the guy I was talking about, his wife divorced him within 1.5 years of marriage because she found out how crazily addicted he was to the bookie. So then he was carrying on an affair with a woman from a neighboring village who used to come to his flat. So they do have a lot of problems. One guy said he used to go to a lot of prostitutes in his youth, but once his wife told him, he stopped immediately. So there are all kinds of people.
We'll take this as the last question.
I read a book truck drivers, trucks and roads. But also I find interesting is milestones, for example. Milestones have changed, and the changing milestones, older milestones have been replaced by newer ones. And that is a very good symbol about the kind of urbanization and motorization, how our road maps and landscapes are changing. Would you like to talk about milestones?
Yeah. So the classic example of milestones, of course, are the coast minars, which was built by the Mughals and Sher Shah Suri starting, which were established every coast. And you find a lot of them on the way from Delhi to Haryana and Delhi to UP, in West UP. So I did spot one. I got very excited when I spotted one of them actually. And that particular thing has existed. Now, of course, we have milestones, normal milestones. But I found that most of the milestones are so terribly mutilated in India. Couldn't read half of the stuff half the times wherever I went.
Right. So I think we're going to say it's a wrap now. And Rajat, it's been a lovely journey, 10,000 kilometers for you,
Thank you.
an hour for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the remarkable session. To show our appreciation towards you, we would like to give you a token of our appreciation, a gift. The gift has been sponsored by Sony OfficeMate, manufacturer and exporter of quality stationery products. The gift kit also contains the book titled Dagan by our V author Kishore Kevate. Can I please request Kishore sir to give it to you? We also have a painting made by Tanushree Thumbre, who would like to present it to you. We wish to acknowledge and thank our esteemed sponsors and support partners: Helpline Charitable Trust, SMS Advocate Limited, Western Coalfields Limited, Manganese Ore, India Limited.